Hey guys, welcome back to the Veteran Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Scott Brewer. I'm your host, also founder of the Dot Mill Gear website and marketplace for veteran products and items. Today I have on my guest, Steve Ankerstar. Steve is an Air Force veteran, fighter pilot. He's a certified financial planner. He has a podcast called On Time, On Target, all about financial planning and investment strategies, as well as a company, a financial management and planning company called Afterburner Financial. In addition to that, Dave also has a subscription-based daily morning brief that airs 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is posted to YouTube, all about live investment highlights, long-term investment insights, and day trading opportunities. So Dave, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it, and I'm excited to pick your brain.
Hey, everybody. And Scott, thanks for having me on. And it's Steve.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast first?
Sure.
What's the basis of it? How do you formulate your content, and where can you find it?
Sure, you bet. So I had considered when I retired from the Air Force back 7 years ago, I wanted to do a podcast right away. And it became one of those things. It's like, it was never really the right time. And much like other entrepreneurs that you've talked to, COVID-19, it's a terrible thing, but also brings opportunity. So being forced to, be at home and not being able to meet face to face with clients, I ended up with a lot more time on my hands. So that's kind of where I broke into okay, I wanted always to do this, so now I'm going to do it. So I started a podcast, totally free, like most are, and just to get information out to you. And each episode is a question. So basically, clients ask me questions, and if more than one asks me, I'm like, I'll make a podcast about that. Much like we were talking earlier about, does gold belong in your portfolio? Well, here's 15 minutes of my answer on does it or don't it, or doesn't it. So that's how I built the podcast, and then some other things have kind of grown out from there.
Yeah, just to highlight, I mean, some of the topics on there I was looking through, and I listen to a lot of financial stuff. So I'm looking through, I'm like, man, these are all questions that I want answers to. So yeah, definitely good stuff. Please check it out for all our listeners out there. Next, I want to roll into a brief rundown of the daily brief.
Sure.
Who can join? Do you have to have a financial background? I mean, who can benefit from this information, and what is the information provided?
Sounds good. So the daily brief, we meet for half an hour every morning, straddling the market open. The who can join is anybody that's interested. You can I have folks that subscribe to it. It is a paid subscription, so $25 a month to get in on it. But once you pay, you're in there. It's a webinar. You can either actively participate through the chat and Q&A, or you can just listen in for your own edification there. I have folks that are very active, and they bring ideas to the table. So it's kind of like an investment forum brought to life right around the market open. I do run it. So since it's webinar, everybody can hear me and see me. Everybody else is either in the chat or the question and answer. So we'll kind of talk about go around the world for the markets in the past 24 hours. We'll talk about the headlines, review of the day. We'll talk about a specific topic of the day. Like this morning was marijuana investing. Why do it? What companies to do it if you're interested in that sort of thesis. And then once we're within 10 minutes of the open, we get into day trading mode. Doesn't matter if you're a day trader or not. You can follow along. It's pretty fun, fast paced. I like it. So we get in, we either take trades or we don't. I will generally call trades for the room. And then after the market's open, those trades resolve in the first few minutes of the day. And then we go on into the question of the day from there. So it's fast paced. It's fun. It's for those that are missing a little camaraderie out there. If you want to speak investing in the morning, it's a pretty good thing for you.
Is it something that you can listen to retroactively? So if you're not able to listen from 9 to 10, or can you go ahead and rewind it or visit it again?
Exactly, because a lot of people have to work right then, right? Because it's kind of hard of the envelope as far as that showing up, and your boss probably not going to dig the, hey, wait a minute, I got this thing going on.
Got a meeting to attend.
But yeah, it's on YouTube. We post it on there every day. Once I fill the room out, I might not do that anymore, but we still have some openings now. So we're taking the whole about 45 minutes. Sometimes we go the full hour, putting on YouTube every morning on the On Time on Target YouTube site. And you can see what we do. So you can check it out before you join. If you decide to join, it's anonymous. You can't beat that. Fighter pods have call signs. Mine's Cruiser. So I'm Cruiser in the room. When you log in, if you logged in as Scott Brewer, we would just give you a call sign and say, hey, I'm going to change your name to something like Avalanche, or just pick something, right? But the idea is that, it's kind of like combat. We're not out there trying to make ourselves look good or whatever. We're trying to out there put our minds together, and get the best investment thesis going for the day we can.
All right. Last thing. If you don't have any financial literacy, let's say, or if you're not really familiar with the terminologies and things like that, is it a place for you, or or do you need sort of a quasi background to kind of join in on that?
You'll understand a little more if you have the background, but it's like anything else. It's kind of its own language. So for the first few days, you'll be sitting there and you can ask questions right in the chat. I have a person that sits right next to me who points to the chat when a new question pops up so I can look over. And if it's an easy answer, like what's beta? It's like, okay. And I can answer, yeah, hey, Avalanche, beta is blah, 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 blah. And here's how it relates to what we're doing today. And then I'm right back to it.
Okay, cool.
So it's pretty fun. Check it out. Again, I'll give you a free trial for a week. You can check it out or check out the replay. And if it's for you, come on out.
Awesome. Transitioning to Afterburner Financial. I guess you've been doing this for what, 3 decades? I think I read that in your bio. And you did some pro bono work within the military while you were in the military. What were some of the things that you focused on as far as financials specific to the military and military families?
Sure, you bet. I'll back up just a little bit. My father was retired Air Force as well. So he retired when I was in 3rd grade, so I don't really remember that, but he kept the uniform on and he taught high school junior ROTC up in Ohio. And so this whole kind of thinking I was going to go in the Air Force was kind of I had that in the back of my mind the whole time. I kind of say I was drafted because barring anything else, I was going to go into the Air Force. But I used to watch a TV show in high school. I'm quite a bit older than you and probably your listeners, but it was called Family Ties, and it had Alex P. Keaton, which was Michael J. Fox, and he was kind of a nerdy high school student that invested, and he carried a Wall Street Journal to school in a briefcase, and yeah, it was a comedy, and obviously making fun of that. But I always thought to myself, hey, I'm really good at math. I want to get into investing, and my parents got me started young. So transitioning on into the Air Force and flying airplanes and eventually being a commander. And it was obviously a privilege to be a commander. And at commander's calls, I would always talk about personal finance type topics. So specific to your question, I would talk to the airmen and the NCOs out there about their savings rate. How much of their salary are they saving? We talk about the basics of buying a house. A lot of time in the military, you're in either the dorms or in base housing, so you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But you could step out into society and buy a house in your 30s, and you're really kind of a rookie because you haven't ever had to do it. Uncle Sam has always provided something for you. So those are really what we talk about is, getting out of debt, emergency fund, saving and investing. Don't buy the brand new car as an airman or a sergeant, and wait till you've earned that a little later on.
Yeah. Watch out for those 25% interest rates, right?
Yes. They're not your buddies, even though you think they are when you talk to them.
Yeah. It happens all too often, unfortunately.
Right.
So tell us, or let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit about your military career, and then we'll transition a little deeper into the financial business that you have.
Sure, you bet. Obviously, very blessed to be able to fly some airplanes for the Air Force. I flew the F-15 Eagle, which is the air superiority fighter. Basically, fly above everybody, make lots of noise, run around flexing your muscles and chasing other airplanes away. And if they're dumb enough to keep coming, then we shoot them out of the sky and don't have to worry about them anymore. So that was that mission. And then the other mission, I was very fortunate to fly the F-117 Stealth Fighter, which is a little black triangle looking fighter. And actually went in flew the opening strike of Shock and Awe back in 2003 for the beginning Operation IRAQI Freedom. Kind of the moons aligned and I was kind of the right guy at the right time and had done okay. So I got the opportunity to go in there and do that. But I will tell you that was based off of me seeing Top Gun when I was in high school. So I walked out of Top Gun. I turned to my buddy Mike and I'm like, hey man, I'm going to do that the rest of my life. And he laughed and told my parents and they're like, oh, that's cute, but let's have another plan just in case. And but I had it in my mind and actually, over the course of the next decade was able to make that dream come true and actually get into flying fighters and then flew basically the rest of my career.
Wow, that's incredible. I actually just saw my first one because I'm here in DC and they did the flyover for 4th of July. And so, I mean, you've seen pictures or you see them at an air show, but you don't really see it flying directly overhead. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this thing is incredible. I didn't realize how big it was. It's a very large aircraft and a magnificent sight to see. But so when did you retire?
I retired back in 2013. So what's that, 7 years ago now. And I knew before I retired, like a lot of your listeners, that, once you know you're getting out, you have to start making your plan.
Yeah.
Hopefully you do. And then start, gearing up towards that. So I had about a year where I knew that it was going to be more important for me to get out instead of continuing on in the military, and then set myself up for my second career, as well as reintroduce myself to my family, because I literally had been just gone. My kids didn't really know me because I was just never around, and if I was sleeping. So that wasn't much of a family life there.
So, I mean, what was that transition like for you? Because, I mean, here you are going from, I mean, basically flying some of the best aircraft in the entire world. And then here you are transitioning out of that. And I guess there's an element of, you're going from a place all the way at the top of an industry to, I don't want to say necessarily you're going back down to the bottom, but I mean, you have to sort of restart over. I mean, here you are, the king, and now you have to restart over. You're a commander. What rank did you get out as?
Lieutenant colonel.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, how was that transition for you?
Well, I'll say two things. That the first one is I really missed, of course, spending a whole career trying to get to the top of my game and flying fighters. But much like the rest of the veterans in the crowd, it's not necessarily the weapons or the toys that you miss. It's the people. And, it's a pretty tight circle of folks that get to do that. And to work with those folks on a daily basis is quite the privilege. So I miss the community of it all. First, and that's why I drug in the name, Afterburner Financial, and couldn't let go, is what my wife says, and a little bit that's true. This is the black flight suit that I wear for interviews, and when I'm doing my speaking engagements, I always throw that on. And of course, On Time on Target is in relation to airplanes as well. But what to answer your exact question is, and I know there's folks out there that are either wanting to make the leap or thinking about it, is when you work in a corporate structure like the military, where your pay, I mean, even if you're a superstar, you can only move so much a little bit faster than everybody else. When you're in a big corporation like the military, or pick a IBM, a lot of times you can't, that entrepreneurial spirit that's there, you can't scratch that itch. You have to leave it all behind, and you kind of can't do it halfway. Some folks will say, hey, do your primary job and then try to start this up on the side. And, I know that you may have a lot to offer there as well from your experience, but it's tough because you can't go all in. And that's what my experience was cut the cord, leave it behind, go absolutely all in, starting from the bottom of the rank structure in the financial world, if you will, and duking it out to get to the top again. And you're right, a lot of people would not want to leave that behind. They'd want to just parlay the rank and the expertise into a Gucci defense contractor job. But I had to do the entrepreneurial thing, and I was very blunt with my wife. I'm like, I would rather do this for a couple of years and fail miserably than not having done it. And that's just kind of the person I am. I thought I would succeed, but you never know till you're out there. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do, is go out, throw my heart and soul into it, and make it happen. And it turned out okay.
And so did you go right into the business itself, or did you get a job somewhere else?
I went right into working for myself as an independent. So most folks, when you talk to their advisors, work for a corporation. So if you Google financial advisor in your hometown, you'll see names, and most of them are part of like Edward Jones or an LPL Financial or Northwestern Mutual. Those are folks that are actually more salesy than advisors, because they have products. And when you walk in the door, much like when you walk onto a Chevy lot, guess what? You're going to buy a Chevy, even if Chevy's not the best for you, right? It's because that's what they're there to sell. So the same sort of thing. I was very anti that. And a lot of that was from the military. You mentioned the payday loan folks and the used car people right outside the gate that have a deal for you. No, hated that. So I wanted to give unbiased advice, fee only, if you've heard that term, fiduciary, where I have to act in your best interest. And I didn't want any corporation behind me that was pushing my agenda. I wanted to be transparent, full of integrity, and exactly what the client either needs, or if you don't need me, I'll tell you, hey, you don't need me. Here's some study stuff. Here's where you need to focus on that, but you're plenty smart. Go off and do it on your own. That sort of thing. So that's why I wanted to be completely independent, and have built basically from nothing up to managing over 25 million in assets over 6 years. So it's a lot of people are very attracted to my business model.
Yeah. Are you a fiduciary? And if so, can you explain what that is to the viewers?
Sure. Absolutely. I am a fiduciary. And what that exactly means is I have to by law, act in your best interest. And when most people hear that, they're like, well, what are you talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is the people that are selling you insurance and putting you into mutual funds and things, they don't have to act in your best interest. They just have to do something that is suitable for you. So there's suitable and then your best interest. So the best analogy I've heard of, if you were to walk in today and buy a suit from somebody, and a regular advisor could grab any suit that fits you, whether you look good in it or not, or whether it's right for whatever you're going to do or not, any suit that they have that they can sell you, as long as it physically fits you, that's a suitability standard. Mine's a fiduciary. So now it's not only does it have to fit, but it has to meet with what you're going to use it for, short-term, long-term, really it's kind of the next step. And it's kind of a shame that financial advisors haven't always had to act in your best interest. And I think as we go into the future, eventually the laws will change to where financial advisors always have to act in your best interest. We'll see.
Yeah, it's an important point because it's something that I didn't even know existed until maybe a few years ago. And then, I know somebody who's in the industry and they sort of explained it, but that's a really great way to explain it, to be honest with you. I mean, that's a very clear and concise way to kind of detail that. So within your business, what kind of services do you provide?
Okay. I provide two. So I'm like you said earlier, certified financial planner, or a CFP. That's not all that commonly known, but sometimes you see, if you ever see the ad with the DJ that, he's sitting there with somebody in front of a computer and saying, hey, you need to do this allocation and things. And then they break and the guy's actually a DJ because there's no qualifications required. That's where it's in the CFP land, certified financial planner, you have to take a test. It's kind of like the financial planning equivalent of law school. It's pretty intense and it's the gold standard out there. And then once you're a CFP, or if you're working with a CFP, you know that they are at the top of their game. So below that, there's two things that CFPs do. One of them is financial planning and the other one is investment management. For financial planning, it's where I sit down and talk with you, your age, your risk tolerance, the assets you have currently, what job you're in, how long you plan to stay in that job, do you get a pension or not out of that job? And we basically, much like a flight plan for a pilot, we're going to take where you are, where you're going, and plot out probably 20 to 100 different points along the way. If you have kids, we'll talk about what's your vision for your kids. Do you want them to go to college, or do you want to save money for them for college? Or are they going off to tech school? Kind of planning everything out for you. That's financial planning. And then the second part is investment management. Just like if you have a Thrift Savings Plan or a 401k or an IRA and you don't know what to do with it, there's people that do it themselves. Certainly, you can look at the markets and soak it all in and invest how you want. People can do that, but there's also folks that don't want to have anything to do with that. They would rather do a million other things than look at individual stocks or index funds and try to pick the best. And that's what I do for folks. So I take the burden of them in using my expertise. I will tell you that I'm very good at what I do, but I would rather prove that over time to folks. So when people sign on, I'm like, give me 6 months and I'll show you that I use all the skills that I have from the military, from the in-depth planning to the threat analysis and everything I've done to keep myself alive in combat. Same thing goes into your portfolio. Get rid of the bad stuff, get rid of the threats, and then let the good stuff run and really work for you.
Yeah. The one thing I think a lot of people don't know about in the military is how to manage their their TSP. There's several different options you can choose from and enable, and people don't necessarily know how to diversify their investment. So could you talk a little bit about, some generic strategies on how you should look at that?
Sure. Yeah, generically. And so a quick disclaimer, this is not tailored advice. So you have to do your own due diligence for acting on what you hear today. So you have kind of the 5 big funds, the CSI, G, and F, right? And you were like, okay, maybe that went like sailing right by. But here's all you need to know. As a person that's of the age of being in the military, you're again at that, kind of 18 to 45, 50-ish, most surveys in that more of the 18s to 20s and 30s. You need to have almost half your exposure in the C fund, which again is the large cap US fund. So if you just do that, then you'll be fine. If you want to put 100% into that, then you just have to look away when there's bad news. So we just had COVID-19. So if you want to take all the risk, you're going to get rewarded for taking all the risks. If you go 100% into the C fund, then you just have to not freak out when the shooting starts, right? So and nobody knows until they're there. But when the markets are crashing and you turn on CNBC and it's doom and gloom and everybody's freaking out, and of course you check your app 15 times a day, right? Because that's helpful. Not really, but you're watching the number get smaller, and you can get into a situation where your portfolio loses more money than your like annual salary, and that can happen very quickly. So you kind of really have to know your game plan. If you're going to take the risk, then you have to close your eyes. It's kind of like getting on a roller coaster. Get on the coaster. There's no real off ramps, right? So don't get on it if you're not going to take the full ride. If you don't like either of those options, you can pick. There's life cycle funds. I don't really like those, but they're certainly valid. Valid investment options to where you pick. Okay, here's where I want to retire, and it's in 2050. So you pick the 2050 life cycle fund, and you're done. That's better. That's better than nothing. But that's a good place to start. There are many forums out there. On Facebook, there's Military FIRE, which is FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early. But really, any of these forums you can get on and ask the question of like, hey, everybody, I hate this stuff. What should I do? And you'll get 50 answers, some good, some bad. Synthesize those a little bit and see what most people are saying. If you do that, then you're probably going to be in a good place. Or you can hire an advisor. Obviously, that costs money. So it's kind of like thinking of the personal training. Most people in the military are pretty built and into working out and know enough to be able to safely operate in the gym, so they can do it on their own. But if you want to get to like the next level, that's when you start looking at, okay, maybe self-education isn't exactly what I'm going to do. Maybe I need to hire a pro, put them on my side so I can get to that next level.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you transition out of the military, can you take your TSP, and can you take that and transfer it into a 401k or some other sort of external entity?
You can. So when anyone's leaving the military, you have the option of, you can leave your TSP in place, and that can be if you're super hands off, that can be a right answer. It's just like, okay, well, it is what it is. I set my allocation, and then when I'll start looking at it again when I'm in my 60s, when I need money. If you want to take everything with you, you can withdraw it and roll it over into a 401k, or you can take it out and put it in an individual retirement account for yourself. Started to get in some alphabet soup there, and I don't want to do that on a podcast, but you have options, and that's one of those. It's like, hey, nobody wakes up in the morning saying, man, this is awesome, I can't wait to go figure out what I'm gonna do with my TSP. But it's one of those things you need to take an hour, 2 hours, put some brain cells toward it, and make sure you have a plan in place, and then you can forget about it again until you switch jobs in another 10 years or so.
Yeah. Last TSP question.
Sure.
At which point do you have to determine that? I mean, can you, like, if I'm 5 years, 10 years out of the military and I still have my TSP, can I look back and go, hey, I want to take this and pull this out? Or is there a certain time parameter that you have to make that decision in?
I don't think there is a time parameter, but I should know that answer, and I don't. Most people either do it right away or they don't ever do it. So with a 401k, you can do it any point in time. So I'd imagine the rules are the same for the Thrift Savings Plan. But the good news is, if there is a fence and you try to do it and you're past the fence, Thrift Savings Plan will say, no, you can't do that. So they'll save you from yourself instead of incurring penalties and things. But it really should be a decision kind of around the time you're in transition, when you're worrying about everything else, right? But that's unfortunately how that works.
Do you also do any debt management consulting? I mean, do you work with people to sort of get out of debt?
I don't. I hand them off to Dave Ramsey, if you're familiar with Dave and his plans. Well, his stuff's too good.
Yeah.
There's nothing that there's really nothing that beats his stuff out there. Most people love Dave, unless you kind of, it is faith-based. So if that doesn't resonate with you, that might irk you a little bit. But yeah, hop into pretty much any program he has out there. Join the cult, if you will. That's kind of a joke, but kind of not. But because I mean, when you start his programs, you need to do what he says. But the good news is, you will be debt free, and you'll be screaming it on his radio show soon, right? And then the monster's off your back. So I don't. I talk to anybody that reaches out to me, and if I can't help them with my particular skill set, which is now past being out of debt, then I point them in the right direction. And you just can't beat Dave Ramsey. He has cornered that market for sure.
So you're step 3 and beyond.
Never really. I was very fortunate that I never really had to take any of his programs, but I did listen to him all through college and out and about. just listen to his radio show. I love the way he talks to people, and kind of, part of a financial advisor, we joke in the industry, is we tell people what they already know.
Right.
So you come into my office and you're like, hey, Steve, I got this sweet Stingray that I want to go buy, and it's, 52K, and I think I can make it work. You already know the answer is no. You just want to go pay somebody to say, now, Scott, do you think that's a really good idea? Here's the ultimate cost of that car. Break it down for you, and you go, okay, I guess I won't get it. So, but that's literally, that's all Dave Ramsey does, is tells people what they really already know is the answer. They just don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I think I'm 3 months away from being done with step 2, which is the debt-free step, for those of you who don't know. So me and my wife started this I think it was maybe like 9 months ago, and we've just divulged all of our money and got it together and just started throwing it at the debt and used this debt snowball, and so we're really excited to hit that milestone and move on. So it's a good program for those of you who are listening or watching. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, congrats. And I 1,000 times exactly what Scott just said. I mean, a lot of people, it's perfect for them.
Yeah. All right. Transitioning to COVID-19, it's a hot topic. We're obviously experiencing there's a lot of people out there that are experiencing a lot of financial difficulty. People are jobless. People are furloughed. People's retirements have gone up and down. They're talking about a V-shaped recovery. Now it's a W-shaped recovery. Where do we stand as a country, as far as the market go? Are we in a recession? Are we in a depression? And sort of what's your general forecast of where we're going to be in, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
Sure. Lot to cover there. So we'll hit the highlights of all of those good topics that you just asked. But I'll kind of start from the beginning. So when this COVID-19 comes out, and it really, it was kind of like nobody really knew what it was. There's Facebook experts on both sides that have no qualifications whatsoever that were spouting exactly what was going on, but nobody really knew until you kind of hit the pandemic. And then it's like, okay, we made the decision, the government made the decision to start closing things down. The unique point of that, which was a challenge for several of my clients, was they had been successful business owners for over 10 years. After about year 3 and you're in the green, you're made, right? So now you just simply like, okay, now I just have to simply scale at, some level to be able to and stay successful. It's like the hard part's behind you. Well, what part of my business plan says contingencies, government shuts me down and doesn't let me open back up? It's like, what am I, in China? Am I in Russia? That doesn't happen in the United States, but yet it did. So, and you threw out some terms there, and a lot of it at the beginning was is this a depression, or is this going to be a recession? And I called it the Great Suppression, because it was the government basically forcing us to close. And I don't want to get anybody triggered by picking a side on all of this. That's not the point. The point is that it was unique, and it didn't matter if you ran a gym, you're closing. And it's like, now what? So you had what I would call folks that aren't used to reaching out to government programs that have, been like, I'm trying to be a productive member of society, and I don't try to have to take help from government. Well, all of a sudden we're forced into that.
Right.
That's not really in their personality. There's some pride there, and so I'm telling my clients, it's like, hey, you got to be all over these loans, and you got to attack them and see what you can get, because you got to save your business, save your employees, all of this. And they're just like, they haven't shot at before. So they're just like, what is going on? So everybody was affected different, but I kind of dealt with the more the business owner types, then kind of help them kind of orient through that. So where are we now? What you saw out of the market was what you would expect, is a huge sell-off as things reprice. So that's kind of the magic word, is repricing. But with any sell-off, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. You have a sell-off like this once about every decade. So that's where it pays to have somebody who sits and stares at markets all day long, because I actually put out a video off of Zoom that I recorded on March 22nd called Lock and Load, because I was like, I'd finally hit my triggers that was, I'm going to buy back in. And it was about 35% off on the way down. And I said, I don't care if it goes to 60% down. I'm like, I'm happy with the prices here. And I was a day early. but you just want to be somewhere near the bottom in those things, because everybody's just logging in and selling everything at once. And that's just so not a good idea. And, we all make our best decisions in an emotional panic, right? No, we don't. So if you haven't thought about it and you're panicking, it's time to have somebody else make those decisions for you. So, lots of money was made and lost during those times. And I feel for those that hit the panic button, and they may still be on the sidelines. We don't know the end of the movie, but the market did snap back more so than a lot of people thought. And that's that repricing is, there were several very innovative, so you saw restaurants go right into the, hey, let's, do the call in and carry out. You even saw some adult entertainment folks coming up with clever names to be able to deliver food. And, here in Texas, you could deliver beer and booze for the first time. So, I mean, we kind of, lots of things just changed to where people are being like, what am I going to do, to get back on my feet? Well, when you have everybody doing that, a lot of things can scream higher. So what carried the market higher? No-brainers like Amazon, Apple, there's still Facebook, still the big names that are out there that are, now it's the work from home environment. So that's where we are now. The market's kind of back to where it was around the COVID levels. The big issues going into the election are, we don't know the end of the COVID-19 story. That's one. We're facing social unrest in different areas of the country at different levels, but as a country, we're facing it. And it's still kind of too soon to tell if that's trending in the right direction or the wrong direction. So that brings a level of uncertainty. And then the third thing, let's just pile on a national election on top of that. And we're 80 some days out. So for those that are in markets or those that understand, there's times to take risk and there's times not to take risk. It's really time to kind of just play it pretty safe, because any of those three could be huge to the financial markets. I will tell you, I don't sit in my office with a crystal ball and know the answers. But I will say there's time to take risk, and it was back in March. But now that you've kind of made all your money back, if you took the full ride, now it's time to go, okay, yeah, that was a good run. Or if you've been making money ever since 2007, 2009, it's like, look at that 400 to 500%. So, you're being greedy if you're just continuing to take risk right on into these very contentious issues. The analogy I use with folks is, you're trying to pick up pennies in front of the steamroller. It's like, yeah, you may snag a few, but the price that you pay if you're wrong is huge. So I would
love that analogy.
I would generally just tell folks, hey, chill for a little bit. Let's have the election or not, or, with Trump, that could be particularly crazy around the election of, he may say, well, no, that doesn't count. It's like, well, that's an interesting scenario. So, democracies need to have peaceful transitions of power, or even if he stays in office, that needs to be peaceful. So civil war doesn't need to break out. So we'll see. But just basically go to safety and kind of wait till 2021. You already know 2020 is kind of a crappy year anyway. So if you're sitting there expecting that to average out, I think we're late enough in the year. That's not going to happen. Yeah, it's just not going to get better. It's one for the books.
It's a net loss. That's it.
Yeah,
write it off.
Write it off. We'll make jokes about it forever. And 2021, we'll actually have something to actually celebrate at New Year's this year instead of last year when the joke was on us.
Real estate. We got.
Sure.
I know, not from a national view, it's not really necessarily the most ideal way to look at things, but I mean, generally speaking, prices are really high, a lot of all-time highs that won't last forever. Where do you see the market going as far as, again, this is a general,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. So prices are high. That's, and I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Dave Ramsey, but somebody else used to say, it's not that the prices are high, it's that you can't afford it. And that's kind of a crass thing to say to people. And I get that. But realistically, prices aren't going to go back down. Especially in real estate, they kind of bump up and then they go sideways for like a decade. And then they take the next step up. So it has to be right for you and your family to buy real estate. You want to think about the roof over your head first, which is an expense. You have a living expense, which you can either do through rent or buying a house, and then part of that's an expense. And then the actual appreciation is the investment, is the land that the house is on. So the house itself depreciates, right? Things break, you put money into it. That's not making you money when you're having to buy, fix things all the time. But it's the property when you sell that has now appreciated, and that's generally due to location. So for everybody out there, generally your own home is your first kind of investment exposure. And what's to real estate, what's brilliant about it is it's structured. We have leverage to get in, obviously with mortgage, or if you have a VA certificate of eligibility, you have that literally. I'm glad you can't sell those, because those would command hundreds of thousands of dollars. There would be this huge, underneath market for them, because that's how good they are. So use your VA certificate if you have one. But once you get into a house, you have that mortgage, and it's basically a forced wealth building program. Nobody really sits in a house for 30 years. Most people don't, I should say. But over time, it's making you build wealth. So when you sell, you're going to have some equity, and then most people take that equity and use that to their next home. And if you kind of skip around and do that 6 to 10 times during your lifetime, that could be alone over $1 million of equity that you've built up, really at $500 a month, through your house payment.
Right.
You just keep building that equity. So that's a very stable, conservative way for folks to build wealth. And that can be one leg. When I talk to folks and say, okay, let's talk net worth, real estate. Okay, what do you have there? What do you have in markets? And then you generally talk cash and life insurance, collectibles, Bitcoin, if that's your thing. Kind of the one-off stuff. And that's kind of that three-legged stool of true wealth.
Just because you brought it up, Bitcoin, way of the future.
I'm too old, man. So I would like to think I'm smart, and I'd like to think I'm on the cutting edge of things. And I mean, I even see TikTok, and I have 2 young daughters, and they're out there. And I mean, this generation that's coming up, everybody that's, old, I'm 50, for a reference point, they think, okay, these kids these days, right? No, these kids are going to be fine. They are learning entrepreneurship at the youngest age. They take 15 seconds to make some video, and they send it out to the free world, and they get immediate feedback. If it's good, it gets a bunch of likes. If it sucks, it doesn't. And they're like, okay, what do? They cry it out and quit? No, they reorient. They make another one the next day. So we're going to be fine with everybody that's out there. But even with what I would think, being able to have a pretty good idea of what the younger folks out there are thinking, I still cannot get my brain around Bitcoin. The technology, I believe in 100%. The blockchain, I think it's Google Sheets on steroids. So I'll probably get some hate comments for saying that, but it really is. It's collaborative, but when the primary people that use this, there's like the people that are like, ooh, finally, we have something that can't be traced by a government. I spent a little too long in the government to think that, oh, goody, it can't be traced by the government. And it's, generally used for nefarious acts. I'm like, well, why would we enable the world, the arms dealers of the world? Why would we enable them with a currency that allows them to operate in the shadows? So I don't know. It's not nothing. If you're fascinated by new things, or if your buddies are all in it and you can't resist, then open up your Bitcoin wallet and buy a Bitcoin or a fraction of one, and then you can laugh years later. But I don't see a currency standing that's not backed by the government. And one thing with age is I've even seen in my lifetime, things go wrong. And when governments go wrong, so think of all this debt we have, that, it is not that we would ever do it, but not that we wouldn't either. Just go, nope, out with that currency. We're going to do a new currency. If you think what Germany did in World War II, it's like countries have done that. So I don't know. I just don't, if a currency is not backed by a government somewhere, I can't process it.
I'll give you 2 more.
All right.
Gold. How much should you have as part of your portfolio? 10%, 20%, 25%?
Yeah. If it's over 10%, then you're kind of, you're almost a dealer at that point. But yeah, 10% is kind of that number. I'm a 0% gold kind of guy, to me. And I made a podcast, episode 39, I believe, on specifically this topic. So yeah, if you believe in just having something that has value, and if you think, okay, inflation is going to be an issue out of this. Yeah, could be. It wasn't out of 2007 and 2009. We're kind of doing the same thing. So we're kind of not worried about it as a government, but it certainly could. Well, things that keep up with inflation are things like gold. Your house will appreciate with with appreciation. And then of course your stocks, if you have individual stocks, those will also appreciate because those get inflated with it. What doesn't is what's get hammered is, things that are sitting in cash basically. So you can buy gold if you want it to just be a hedge, and don't buy physical gold. You can go online and buy it through any brokerage. GLD is the ticker symbol. That's a good way to own it electronically. But if you get into more than 10% or so, you're probably trading it. So you're trying to be, I'm smarter than the market. And there are times you can do that. I do a bit of trading myself, couple a week on different things. But the market is a weird beast. And when you think you're smarter than it, I like to say, none of us is as dumb as all of us. And the market is all of us. So you can't predict how dumb everybody is. So if you're doing something, kind of get in, get out, do it surgically on something that's already in the move. But gold is not what I would necessarily want to offer up as a trade.
All right. Last one.
Sure.
Stimulus package specifically, well, not even necessarily the package itself, but let's talk a little bit about payroll tax and what it means for the average worker.
Sure. So out of each payroll tax, when you have a job out there going off to your Social Security each year, it's every dollar you make, 12.4 cents of that goes off to your Social Security. So that's your payroll tax. Now, out of that 12.4 cents on the dollar, or percent, if you will, of your salary or your hourly, the worker is paying 6.2% of that. And then your employer is paying 6.2% of that. The idea behind suspending the payroll tax is it kicks the can to the end of the year, where you're going to have more money in your pocket to be able to take care of yourself and your family. So in a way, it's a mini stimulus. And then what happens at the end of the year is the kicker. If they simply say, okay, that was just for funsies, you don't owe it after all, then it will actually, you've had more money in your pocket at the time. If they say, well, now you just owe all those taxes, like I'm an employer, I have W-2 employees, now all of a sudden I have to write a larger check, where it's really easier if I just kept pace with it. So I would not opt into that anyway, because I have a system and I have cash flow and burn rates and all that stuff that I track. So it's like, I just want to pay my people their money at the time. Now, if you're at home sitting saying, yes, I hope this payroll tax goes through, don't forget that money that you're now getting in your pocket to spend generally is going to your Social Security, your future self. So you're robbing your future self is all you're doing, which people love to do that all the time. That's what debt does, is it pisses off your future self, makes your future self broke but your today self is like, yeah, this is awesome. So you're not really, it's not like you're making more or less money. You're not feeding your Social Security. So that check way down the road that I know you don't care about, and you'll probably say, oh, it won't be there, but it will. It'll be a little bit different form, but it'll be there. You're kind of just robbing your future self with that sort of thing. But it certainly makes everybody feel good about themselves. And when you go into an election, you certainly want to throw things out there that makes everybody feel good about themselves, so they'll vote for
you. All right. Well, just one last time, let everyone know how they can reach out to you for your services. Just a heads up, we didn't really cover this, but Steve is also in Austin, Texas, or at least that neighboring area right there.
Yeah, you bet. And Scott, thanks again for having me on. This is an awesome forum. It's awesome what you're doing with your podcast and helping veterans out there. So I love it, and privileged to be on and be a part of it. To get a hold of me, I'm a very social person. So reach out. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, just Steve Ankerstar. If you Google that, you'll find all my handles. And if we have show notes, you'll see that today. But if you're interested in services, then go to afterburner-financial.com or just Google those two words and you'll find a contact form on there. And then if you are interested in the podcast, which is what I recommend everybody start with, just because that way you can hear me talk on a daily basis. I tend to think I can bring some humor into a very boring topic. So that's why I think it is going to be very popular, and so far so good. Listen in for a little while. If you think, if you like what you hear and you maybe want to do some business with me, check out the OTOT Now website. And if you think I'm crazy, then tune me out and tune somebody else in that you resonate with. So.
Well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. For all you guys who are listening, please subscribe, share, and comment below. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'll send them to Steve, and we'll get you an answer. Thank you again, Steve. I appreciate it, and stay motivated.
You bet, buddy. Thanks again.
Take care.